Tonight, it is all things Bama. Grab a drink and join us on tonight's Tailgate. Hey everybody, thank you for joining us tonight. It is the Tailgate. As always, I am Luke.
I'm Dennis.
And I'm Michael.
And today we have a very special guest. We have Dave Ozment. Am I saying that right?
Absolutely.
And he's from the Alabama Football Podcast. So Dave, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing?
Doing great. And I appreciate, gentlemen, you having me on this evening.
Of course. We are very happy to have you on. So we're going to have to kind of figure out what to talk about tonight because obviously Alabama is that one team that just doesn't have much going on this offseason.
It's been so consistent the past few decades. It's like nothing ever gets lost.
There's no news, right?
A very quiet offseason. It's very quiet offseason.
So obviously we got to start off.
So with coaching, obviously an entirely different staff. How does everyone around Alabama, just Tuscaloosa, feel about it?
You know, I think there's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. I guess we're going to be able to put a measuring stick to that come Saturday. It's our spring game. We call it 8A. And so, there's a big push to sort of fill the stadium or replicate, Saban, the attendance for Saban's first, 8-day many moons ago. And so that'll be a measuring stick. What kind of crowd do we draw for that? But I'm anticipating a pretty good turnout. And there's a lot of energy and excitement. We've had quite a run under Saban. There's always going to be some trepidation when there's a new regime that comes in. But I think there's a lot of excitement around Kalen DeBoer to be able to bring in one of the other four coaches in the playoffs. I don't want to. I mean, in some level, I guess it's unprecedented because the playoffs haven't been around that long. But that's a pretty lofty sort of transition. And a lot of times when there's coach transition, it's because really the program's kind of run aground. Mm-hmm. Even if there's a legend, they may not be fired, but they might be sort of encouraged to participate elsewhere. Sure. And Saban, he kind of pulled a Forrest Gump on us. He just decided to stop running, and so he stopped running, and so we had to find a new coach. But I think we did really, really well in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys actually made a great choice. Like as far as the Warriors, like everywhere he's gone, he's been a head coach, leading prayer. He's never lost. He's always used to winning, and which in Bama the past 20 years. That's exactly what they've been used to. They've been fortunate to have that. So I think that was a great hire. But I feel like also with the coaches that he's been able to bring onto his staff has also been kind of interesting just to who he's been able to bring. Like obviously the easy one, offensive coordinator, Brian Grubb, is somebody he's familiar with. So I feel like that's kind of a natural fit. Do you think it's going to carry on to be the same kind of offense that he had in Washington? Do you think it'll work out with Bama?
Two of the coaches that we brought on for just a minute, and then they had opportunities to stay in Seattle. But Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff, offensive line coach, we were super excited about those two coaches being on the staff. And as soon as they had an opportunity to sort of stay home, not move, keep the family intact, and then get promoted to, call it a promotion to the NFL, they elected to stay. I get it, but darn it, I wish they had come on to Alabama. Yeah. I do think the offense, we don't have a Michael Penix sort of pulling the trigger, and so it'll look and feel different. And we adjust. Coaches always adjust their personnel, but I think it's going to have more of an offensive flavor. Saban was a defensive coach and brought in guys to run the offense. I think Kalen DeBoer is almost the opposite of that. He's going to run his offense, and I suspect that we're going to be slinging the ball around a little more than maybe we have historically, and that's going to be a little bit of a transition for Alabama fans that just want to play defense and run the ball. But I think there's going to be a level of excitement that goes with it as well.
Now, I personally, when Saban announced his retirement, I kind of just made the initial, whoever comes in next is the sacrificial lamb. The next guy in is that. Do you think that Bama fans and what you're hearing from fans, what you're hearing from the rumblings in there, Are they going to give him a good shot if maybe things aren't so happy the next couple of years? Or do you think that they'll run him out if there's any kind of horrible downfall?
We have to define, maybe, what that is. Sure. I think we probably have a couple losses this season, but I think there's an understanding that there's a transition. There's a lot of confidence in DeBoer. Yeah. He came in, I think he was at the top of a lot of people's lists. A lot of people wanted Lane Kiffin or Sark, and those are not practical, I don't think. No. A lot of people, just at the fringes wanted Kirby Smart. That's not going to happen. Right. And so when you get to what's realistic, there were a couple of coaches that sort of rose to the top, and DeBoer was certainly one of those names. I think and what he's already come in and done with some of the recruiting, bringing guys in, not just the transfers, but some of the big name recruits that he's been able to bring in. He went a long way in sort of putting a check mark next to can he recruit when he swapped Ryan Williams, 5-star receiver recruit that kind of committed to Alabama, committed to Auburn, looked like he was solid there, and then, got him back in the Alabama fold. So I think that sort of proved a little bit. And then there's a lot of excitement around, the coaching staff. It's a younger staff, and maybe, I think Saban was having a harder time later, sort of the last third of his career, having a harder time getting coaches in because you want to go somewhere and know that you're going to be there a few years.
Right.
And there's always questions about, a coach retiring. You don't want to start your, you don't want to start a kid in the high school and the coach retired 2 years in, right? Yeah, and so I think that really contributed to Saban having a hard time, putting together a top flight staff, and I don't think that's going to be a question. But I don't remember the original question, but there's a lot of energy and excitement around Kalen, and it'll certainly be fun to see, as he rolls out his offense.
No. And you've definitely seen he's definitely brought some guys in. I think the biggest thing when you saw who left originally, especially like Caleb Downs, and then you even had kind of your quarterback of the future, right, Julian Sayin, who left. Obviously, those are the two big ones in my mind. I'm an Ohio State fan, so thank you, Saban. But, he did a really good job. I know he brought in a lot of his guys from Washington to kind of fill some of those gaps. And then he got Keon Saab, right? Or Saab, I can never get that right, which I thought, if you can't have Caleb Downs, I think Saab was a great pull. Michigan, he wasn't getting the playing time at Michigan. They're kicking themselves now because their big guy tore his ACL. But talk about some of the guys that they got added, and then kind of like a secondary question. When you look at the roster and you look at the players, who is the guy that you're like, oh, I'm excited to watch him?
Yeah. There was a lot of angst across the Alabama fan base. Damn that NIL 30-day window, right? It just felt like every day there was a new negative headline, and it was the end of the world and all of the sort of the overreactions. There's no doubt about it. Alabama lost a lot of talent. Yeah. There's a couple guys going to here's an example. There's a couple guys going to the NFL, but we lost a net 10 players in the secondary. In the secondary alone, that's a 2 deep nickel
crazy
package. And players that would compete and for starting roles this year. And of course we lost it at other positions as well. But it's I liken it to it's like baseball. Other teams had sort of their top of the inning, and so maybe we get our bottom of the inning. We've brought in 8 players so far. You mentioned a couple of them. A couple of 3 guys, came over from Washington. They brought in Austin Mack, a quarterback from Washington, and I think that was the impetus for Julian Sayin to just sort of move on. Hey, I understand I'm going to be a younger classman here, but you're going to bring in a transfer sort of the same level that has a year in the coach. I think, I don't want to say that was writing on the wall, but I think Kalen probably could have kept one, but not both. And he sort of made his choice. And so there's a little bit of, okay, I'll trust that and whatnot. I also think there's going to be some transfers. I think the portal opens up sometime in May. Maybe it's May 1st. I think Alabama picks up 3 to 5 additional guys in the portal. We probably need a little depth at offensive line and like a rush end if we could get the right one. You always use depth at defensive tackle and somebody else in the secondary. So I think we get a couple of picks there, wide receiver. I don't know. We'll see. But that's kind of my guess in terms of players that I'm excited for this season. A player that played just a little bit last year as a true freshman, but really showed pop every time he was offered an opportunity was Justice Haynes at the running back position. I think he is boy. I thought he was going to go to Georgia and sort of transfer back. Boy, that was a scary. And I'll say this, I didn't want Downs to leave at all, but going to Ohio State hurts less than had he gone to Georgia. So I just had nightmares of Haynes and Downs going to Georgia and like Jesus, and then we have to play them like third week of the season. And so I'm glad neither of those happened. But I think Justice is going to be an exciting player to watch on the offense. And then I don't know which player to circle just yet. Maybe Saturday I'll have a better perspective.
Sure.
But in the secondary, I'm excited to see how the secondary comes together. Right now it's Malachi Moore. Thank God for Malachi Moore coming back. And then it's like, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. He's going to be playing with 2 transfers and 2 true freshmen. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Weeks 1, 2, 3 will be very different than weeks 7, 8, 9 in the secondary. I just hope they can start to get some reps this Saturday, and see how quickly they can get up to speed.
Yeah, that first game against Western Kentucky, right? That's going to be a very telling game. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a hard game.
No.
But it's one to get your horses together.
Yeah, because he's gonna have with like you said, with those freshmen and those young guys around him, he's gonna have a lot of work cut out for him, and he's gonna have 2 games to kind of get 3 games: Kentucky or Western Kentucky, South Florida, Wisconsin, to kind of get them going. And really, they need to get going before Wisconsin because they could be a handful.
And you can't sleep on South Florida either.
No. Oh, true.
That's barely passed them last year.
Well,
they gave us a rough way to go last year for certain.
Yeah.
That was I reference back that rainy, soggy day in Tampa in September. Like that's sort of I've referenced that probably a dozen times, and let's get them in Tuscaloosa and
true.
Maybe give them a little bit of payback on that one. But
there you go. Yeah. So, what other big news is coming out of Tuscaloosa right now? Obviously, there's
so much big news.
There's been a ton of big news. You guys have had some of the biggest news in college football, just with the GOAT retiring. But what other things, like smaller things that maybe you guys are hearing because you're a lot closer in proximity, or you're just hearing because of your connections or whatnot, especially for the fan base?
Yeah. I'll take your question a little different direction and sort of come back. The other sort of biggest news coming out of Tuscaloosa is Nate Oates saying that he's not going to Kentucky. So that was really good news.
That's awesome because I don't want to play against Nate Oates all the time at Kentucky. Gee whiz.
So that was really exciting. But the practice report, the spring practice reports, they are what they are, right? Every coach is going to say we look good and bad because we're playing against ourselves and those kinds of things. But it's positive reports about the players' buy-in. Putting in the extra rep, especially some of the young guys, adapting to playing, college ball. Some of them that actually should still be in high school, they just sort of were mid-years. So there's a lot of positive in terms of spring practice, players picking it up, sort of the esprit de corps, buying into the system. There's a lot of positive talk about Milroe, and so hopefully he'll continue sort of his progression. And then the Jeremy Bernard wide receiver that came from Washington. A couple of practice followers have said he's clearly the best receiver on the team. And so that's interesting. The last couple of years, we've struggled to identify a number one receiver. And so if he can step in and take that mantle, I think that'll really be good. And then I think the defense is having good days and bad days because they're acclimating to a really new system. It's still going to be sort of a 4-2-5, but there's a lot of variance in even how that's going to work. And the swarm defense is less of a man-to-man. Saban ran a lot of man-to-man and sort of, passing off players. But I think the swarm defense is more of a zone. It's everyone sort of eyes at the quarterback and then moving to the ball as opposed to, tracking, a one-on-one sort of relationship there. So in coverage. So I think, defense probably has a little further to go, which is, sometimes the case, I guess, but here I think it definitely is.
Fair enough.
So when you look at the schedule next year, I was about to say next week, but when you look at the schedule next year, and this is, what we kind of preface this with, you can be as homer or as analytical as you want. It's up to you. But when you look at that, end of the season comes, we're heading to the playoffs. Where do you think Alabama is? Maybe record-wise, and are they in that hunt for a national championship? Are they in a playoff spot? Maybe getting a round or two in. What are your thoughts on the outlook of this team?
Yeah, there's excitement for this team, and but I don't, is that a 1-for-1 because we think we're going to compete for something, which in prior years maybe has been the case. There's an excitement to see what the new regime can do, but there's a recognition that there's a lot of youth. I think the expanded sort of SEC schedule and the round robin sort of format, that and then obviously the new teams. And I really want to be optimistic. Maybe we're 10-2 if things sort of come together. We might be a 9-3, team this year at the end of the regular season. I don't think 10-2. I don't know. 9-3. I don't think would get us into the SEC championship game. And it's hard to forecast. It's hard to forecast what the new 12-team playoff would be. Would a 9-3 Alabama third or fourth team in the SEC get into a 12? Maybe. Yeah. But it sounds crazy for me to say, new coach, we're going to make the playoffs again, because that sounds preposterous. But in a 12 system, who knows? But, Georgia at home, and then LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee on the road, and Oklahoma the week before we play Auburn. No distraction there. We're normally playing, Sisters of Mercy that weekend. So, there's going to be a whole sort of approach change to that. But I think it's going to be a positive year, even if it is 9-3. Look, a lot of teams will be happy for 9-3. So I understand we have first world college football problems here.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully it looks a little bit better from leaving Saban than it did from leaving Bear. Hopefully you don't go on another 27-year drought. Was that what it was?
Yeah. I think it's a good point there. And I think I think Kalen DeBoer is going to have a lot of success. But if he doesn't, there's one thing that the Kalen DeBoer hire does, and it cuts the cord. We're not going to be hunting for coaches in Saban's shadow because we've already cut the cord. We've already said we're going to try to hire the best guy out there. Sure. And by golly, if it's not him, then we'll find the next one. Yeah. But we're not going to wander through this wilderness of looking for someone that had a cup of coffee with Saban, for the next 20 years. So in that regard, even if the worst of the worst happens, then maybe that buys us the right next coach. But I don't say that with any expectation that DeBoer's not going to be, I think he's going to be successful.
So I have a quick question for you. I've always heard that, I've been seeing just news everywhere where Nick Saban still has not control, but still has a say within the coaching realm within Alabama. Have you seen him, or do you know if he's been involved as much as they've been reporting it?
He has an office in the stadium, which is not the football facility. So he's not like down the hall, from the coaching staff. He has an office in the football stadium. what he does there, I really don't know. It's a part of the stadium that he's never been to. There's a restaurant right outside of it.
Okay.
And he said, "What's that place? I've never heard of it before. How long has it been here?" and it predated him. So he's got, such narrow blinders. But I don't think he's making personnel decisions. I think he's probably going to be intentional about not attending a lot of practices. Maybe if he's invited, it would probably be at A-Day. But I think Saban, I think there's a couple, things that sort of play in. I don't think Saban wants to lord over or cast a shadow over the program. I think he wants DeBoer to be his own character. And then DeBoer, interestingly enough, when he was at Washington, Chris Peterson had an office in the building, and it's Peterson's, sort of a highly regarded coach as well, left on his own, and so and he's a coach that could have sort of cast a shadow over the program. And I don't think that was his personality either. But Kalen was not intimidated by having Chris Peterson that close to the program. I don't think he'd be intimidated by having Saban that close to the program.
I feel like that'd be a help that anybody would take.
New recruit, let's walk down to Saban's office.
Yeah. No, exactly, right? And so Saban's like, use me in that regard. Kane Womack had, this is, back February, early March, he had a couple meetings with Saban just to sort of bounce defensive ideas off the table. And there were a couple interviews with Kane, and he was talking about, he felt like he was going, to his first job interview or first day of school or something. He like dressed up a little spiffy and had to extra prepare, his slides and his content to have the conversation. He felt a little bit, of nerves of going to meet with Saban, but I think that's something that'll fade as they spend a little more time together. But it's fun to kind of hear those stories.
Oh yeah,
I think he's probably a tremendous resource for the coaching staff as well.
Yeah, whenever I'd hear about them saying that Saban still had an office there, I just pictured it as like the other side of the police glass, where like Saban can see in and he can't see out, and so he's just like watching and making notes. And
I just always imagine it was like something petty though too, like he had the championships like just all lined up next to him. Like, hey, to get to me, you got to walk through this hallway and see everything I've accomplished.
Right. So, but it's nice to hear that he's there, but not
just there. More as like advisor and things like that. Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Anything else that you want to share about Bama before we head off?
I'm just excited about this. Well, I mean, the season's so far away, but excited about spring, and then we'll see how the transfer portal opens up. And but yeah, there's a lot of change, and change is good. I think there's going to be some changes to the NIL and the portal and sort of time frames. I think some of that has to be cleaned up, but there's nothing wrong with paying players or what they earn. Right. Let them sort of make money off their success. I'm excited about that. Let's kind of do it a little differently and better. I think there's probably some consensus around that. But this promises to be an exciting season in college football in general, because there's so many changes. The Big Big Ten, the SEC, the 12 team. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting landscape come this fall.
Oh yeah, we're excited about it. The playoffs are just going to be. I mean, we're not even
playoffs are just SEC and Big Ten.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to the first one, the expanded playoffs. They're already expanding them again. I mean, it's just amazing. 64 in 3 years. Who knows what's going on? But well, hey Dave, thanks. Before we head off, if you want to just where can we find you? What's your Twitter? What's your, where's your podcast? All that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Alabama Football Podcast. Very creative naming there, but that's who we are. It's what we do. Alabama Football Podcast. We're on iTunes, .com at the end, our website, and at gmail.com, and that's how you can reach us through email. We're at Twitter or X at Bama Football Pod. It was a limited characters, and I ran out of characters, so that's what we ended up with. But at Bama Football Pod is where we are on X. And again, appreciate you guys having us on. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and we'll get with you later on in the season and take a little trail on what happened.
We'll probably have to do it after the third weekend in October, if you know what I mean. See what happens.
I know what that translates to.
That Alabama-Tennessee game. That'll be a fun one.
Right, yeah.
We'll go
mark it down. Let's do it.
Go ahead and book it on there. So, well, Dave, thanks so much. You have a good night, and we appreciate you very much.
Absolutely. You as well.